FORA.tv. The world is thinking.
I think that the change, it sounds odd saying this, is that Bush had become more mature. Well, two things that sort of play against each other. It's odd talking about a 61-year-old guy who, at 53 wasn't terribly mature, but he really wasn't. He was very much a work in progress. I mentioned that he didn't know much about history then, but he was a very he was just rough politically in so many ways, and though it's difficult to convince people of this to this day, he's much more sophisticated now than he was then. Now, what makes that difficult to persuade people of is that he seemed very confident and likable and popular back then, and not making as many miscues. The reason for that is that he had nothing to be defensive about in Texas. He was very popular then, and he worked well with the conservative Democrats who controlled the legislative branch. He sort of passed the full Monty of his legislative agenda right away, and Texans loved him, and the world was his oyster. At the same time, he wasn't challenged by reporters, and he stuck very closely to a script. And it's amazing to read the transcripts of my interviews with him in 1998 when he was off script. I mean, he said some amazing stuff, and one that it's not a gaffe, but I printed it in the book. I didn't print it in my GQ story because I didn't think the subject of Iraq was interesting at all in 1998. But he said to me, and I've read this enough times to be able to quote it verbatim. He said to me, "You can't lead a divided state. That was my problem with Nixon. He divided the nation. I think my father will go down in history as a great president because with his Iraq policy, with Desert Storm, he not only united the nation, he united the world." Obviously, that's a somewhat ironic statement these days. But the president talked very unguardedly. Well, when he was governor back then, of his feelings about his discomfort about, say, gay marriage, but his basic feeling, but his real discomfort with using that as a polarizing issue, and I quote. I put all this in the book, that it's very interesting to see. It's not so much that his views have evolved, but that his tendency to placate the conservative base have become much more pronounced. He didn't have to in Texas, but after losing the New Hampshire primary of 2000, he learned his lesson, and that became this duality throughout his presidency of how to be this different kind of Republican that he promised he would be when he was running, and at the same time satisfy the conservative base, which, ironically, I think he fed that beast at his own peril, and by 2006 it devoured him on subjects like immigration. That was a hardy beast now, and came and sort of bit him in the posterior on that particular issue.